Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. A topic I want to talk about today is how businesses seem to be finding it increasingly valuable to share data beyond their own enterprise data warehouse, both inside and outside of their organizations. Some are even using data to surface key insights between departments or between companies, while others are simply using it to help monetize their data. And while historically data sharing has involved the copying and or the movement of large data sets, data warehouse vendors such as Snowflake have made it easier than ever before to share data between organizations or even groups of organizations. So while the ability to share data with ease has increased, the mechanisms for sharing the accompanying business logic and modes of analysis alongside that data itself are sadly still lacking. And it's the business logic that's extremely valuable because it contains a consistent interpretation of any data and is designed by data experts that simplify, analyzes, and unifies metrics between data consumers. So today's guest is David Mintz, who has possibly the coolest job title in the world as the Chief Data Evangelist at Looker. And throughout his career, Daniel has focused on how people interact with data in their everyday lives and how they can also use it to get better at what they do. And he's a bit of a celebrity on the media circuit because he's appeared on everything from NPR's All Things Considered to MSNBC's The Last Word to the New York Times and the Washington Post. And he's also a regular speaker at conferences including Google Next, AWS reInvent, eMetrics, the Big Data Innovation Summit. But if we take a step back from the tech and delve deeper, he's a guy that lives in Brooklyn with his wife, his daughters, and his giant white dog. And also an avid photographer and bread maker. Sounds like my kind of guy. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to New York so we can speak with Daniel Mintz, Chief Data Evangelist at Looker. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Daniel. Can you tell the listeners a little more about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my title is Chief Data Evangelist at Looker. I've been doing data and analytics for, a lot of years in various capacities in working with political data and publisher or media data. I've been at Looker for about 3.5 years. My job, well, I have a bunch of things that sort of comprise my job, but the main thing that I do is I talk to people and I think about and I write about how to use data well, how to use it to actually make better decisions and drive your business forward, which fundamentally is what people are trying to do with data to get value from it.
You have an incredibly cool job title, that's got to be said. But before we do talk about Looker, I want to try and delve into the kind of problems that you're solving with technology. So can you tell me a little bit more about how businesses today are actually finding it increasingly valuable to share data beyond their own enterprise data warehouse, both inside and outside their organizations, and actually start removing data silos?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the thing that I think about a lot is just how much data is being collected today in the modern enterprise. I think that is what most of us do for a living is put data in computers. We probably don't like to think of it that way because it's kind of maybe a sad way to think about what we do. But fundamentally, that is what we do. Whether you're a salesperson, sitting at Salesforce and updating your forecasts, or you're a marketer, bidding on online ads, or even my wife, who is a Pilates instructor. Most of the time that she spends working where she's not actually teaching is, going through the scheduling app and creating, opening up a slot here, telling this person that they can take this class, creating new classes. And so fundamentally all of these people are putting data into machines. And so the question isn't whether we're going to put data in. The question is whether we're going to be able to get answers back out. And so, I think people know that the data is there. They know that these computers have answers that would be valuable to them, that would help them do their jobs better, but they don't know how to access it. My wife does not have an easy way to ask questions of all that data, but undoubtedly that data knows, which clients are likely to cancel at the last minute, which classes fill up fastest, whether she should have advanced classes on Fridays or beginner classes. Like, all of those answers are there in the data. And so I think the real point for businesses today is they need to find the right tools and the right systems and the right processes to actually give people across the enterprise the ability to ask those questions of the data and get answers back.
And I think it's important to point out that Looker isn't a point solution that just serves one department or one industry, but actually a flexible suite of tools that can be used to make sense of any kind of data. So can you tell the listeners a little bit more about exactly what Looker is and how you're solving problems that we just talked about there?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I was a customer of Looker's for 3.5 years, and the thing that really sold me on Looker was exactly that, was that it was a solution that could serve all different parts of the company. And, I think the thing that sets Looker apart is really that Looker leaves your data in your database or your data warehouse, wherever it currently lives. Most tools that people are used to using for business intelligence, they want to extract the data, they want to pull the data out. And there was a very good reason for doing that, which is that the data warehouses, the databases, simply were not capable of leaving the data in place and querying it there. So BI had to take that data out, put it into a workbook, put it into a cube, put it somewhere else where you probably couldn't get all of the data, you couldn't get all of its richness, but you could get enough of it to do something with. And that was driven by the technology constraints, right? Just by the state of the world. But then the big data revolution happened, and I think largely that was oversold in a lot of ways. One place where I think the big data revolution really did deliver is these incredibly fast, incredibly cheap, incredibly easy to use databases and data warehouses that now exist. Everything from Amazon Redshift to Snowflake to Google BigQuery and on and on. And so once you take away that constraint, you need to rethink, why were we doing things the way we were? And when you realize, we were doing things the way we were because of the technological constraint that is no longer there, it gives you an opportunity to rethink the way to do things. And so Looker, by virtue of being born in a world of fast, cheap databases rather than slow, expensive databases, said, let's leave the data there. Let's let the databases do the work. And, let's put a semantic layer. Let's put a thing that converts the raw data into something that is meaningful to the business between users and the data, so that they can ask questions using the terms that they're familiar with and get answers that they know are reliable, right? Get answers that are not their interpretation of the data, but are the whole company's agreement on what the data means.
So if we have any business leaders listening that are quite intrigued by how you're doing this, do you have any use cases or maybe a customer story that you can share that would just help them visualize how you're helping bring this data to life?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, to touch on a great example from the UK and now across Europe, Deliveroo, who you absolutely cannot miss if you're anywhere that they serve, because they're bike messengers, their bike delivery people are everywhere. Deliveroo, as most people know, grew really, really fast over the last few years. And so they knew that they were going to need data in order to be able to scale like that. But they initially didn't have the tools to put data in all of their people's hands, all of their users' hands. And they bought Looker and they made it really part of their company culture. It is, part of your onboarding process. Your first week involves a deep Looker training, and one where you're expected to be able to make your own dashboards and really understand how to get access to the data that you need to do your job. And if you don't do that, you kind of can't graduate from your first week of training, right? So, I think that ability to really infuse all of their decisions across the company, from marketing to sales to, logistics, with data is a really different model of operating, and it's one that didn't really exist, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. It simply wasn't possible. People were making do with the tools that they had, and those had some, drawbacks, some real limitations. And so people did the best that they could, but too often they sort of fell into one of two camps. Either the data was locked away in a data warehouse, and you were trying to protect that warehouse from the users because it simply couldn't stand up to their queries, and you certainly didn't want to pay another $1 million or $2 for another one. And so you got these bread lines, these long lines of people waiting for access to the data because they had to get it through the analysts or the IT department, who were the only ones that actually had access. Or you had chaos where everyone had a little bit of the data and they were allowed to sort of make up their own interpretation of the data. I mean, I've talked to companies where really critical basic metrics like what is a customer had 6 different definitions depending on which department you asked and which spreadsheet they were using. There were literally 6 different definitions of what is a customer, and it's just really hard to run a business and make good strategy if you can't agree on those basic metrics. So I think Looker's key insight was that we could solve both of those problems at the same time. We could both give people access and maintain standards and agreement on what the data meant.
I think it's also worth highlighting that you recently announced that you'd signed an agreement to join the Google Cloud family too, which sounds like an incredibly fantastic opportunity for Looker. And I appreciate you probably can't tell me too much about it because it is very early stages, but can you expand on that announcement and why it's so exciting for both yourselves and your customers?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so as you guessed, I am somewhat limited in what I can say. Google, we've agreed to be acquired by Google Cloud, but there's still a bunch of regulatory approval that's ongoing, and so we're somewhat limited in what we can say. But I do think one thing that is worth noting is that part of Looker's strategy since the very beginning has been to sort of leave the data where it lives and bring business intelligence, bring analytics to the data. Whether that's on-premise, whether it's in one cloud, whether it's in many clouds. And that has really been critical to our success. It's something that, a huge majority of our customers, I would say, have Looker connected to more than one database. And so knowing that they can leave the data there, across clouds, or if they have, our transactional database is on-premise, but then we have all these cloud tools, and we need to be able to look at that data together in one place. That's really critical to the way that Looker does things. It's critical to why people love Looker. And it's going to stay very much the same. I mean, Google's made a number of announcements lately about their multi-cloud strategy, and so I think that part of our vision about how to do data well is very much aligned with the vision that Google Cloud has espoused.
And another thing that we're noticing now is the ability to share data with ease has increased, undoubtedly. But mechanisms for sharing the accompanying business logic and modes of analysis alongside that data, that has been lacking, but until now. Now, I know you're slightly biased, but do you think that this could deliver a real competitive advantage, especially for those early adopting businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the mode of doing analytics for a long time has been to marry the data and the logic together. And the reason for that, again, was technology and technology constraints. But the sort of simplest way to think about this is an Excel spreadsheet. In an Excel spreadsheet, there are both the actual numbers and the formulas that make sense of those numbers. And the way, if you've ever had the misfortune to work with Excel, when it's trying to pull data from somewhere else, it doesn't work very well. That's not really how it's designed to work, right? It's designed to have the actual data in it right alongside the formulas. And so there's a reason for that, right? It's because having that data locally, having those formulas right there makes Excel work well, and it makes it fast and all of those good things. But, the problem with that is it means that the logic for interpreting the data lives right on your computer. And if you send, me version 2 of your document and I start working on it, and then you go, oh no, did I send version 2? I meant to send version 3. Can you undo all your changes? And I say, well, no, I just spent a day working on it. That problem is born of the fact that the logic and the data live together right there. And data is heavy, right? The thing that makes the Excel workbook really big is all of the data that's in it. The formulas are tiny comparatively. And so what Looker realized was we can actually divorce those two things. And so we can keep the very lightweight, layer that makes sense of the data, basically the formulas, the semantic layer, in one place. We can version control it. We can let people collaborate on it and see what's going on with it. But we can leave the data in the database. And so that means that sharing a piece of data now is really just about sharing a particular view of the data and the logic, both of which are very lightweight, without actually having to move the data. And so that just makes sharing so much easier, because I can send you a link. You just open that link in your browser and you see the exact same thing that I'm seeing, because neither of us has had to move the data. So that, I think, is a really key, a sort of critical insight that Looker had early on that makes the process of looking at data and sharing data very different.
And there's some great examples there. And it really highlights the differences, or the huge gap between the old way of doing things and the new way of doing things. So what kind of feedback have you received from your customers? Because I would imagine that it's a huge difference to them, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, our earliest customers were well, I was one of our earliest customers, but a lot of our earliest customers were sort of startups and, didn't have all of this baggage about sort of how data was supposed to be done. And I think they got it very quickly. I think as Looker has grown and started working with, a much broader array of companies and in all different geographies, I think what we've learned is that people in different places and in different industries have different expectations about how data is supposed to be done. And so there's a real education process to let them know that simply adopting a new technology is not going to change things, that it's really about technology and people, right? That's what changes culture. That's what changes the way that people do things. And so really thinking about both sides of that puzzle, about how do we change the technology, but how do we also change the processes and the expectations that people have. But then once it clicks, the reaction is just, it's joy, right? It's like, oh my goodness, I can finally see what's going on in the data that I really needed to see, and I can do my job better. I can do my job faster. I can do it more efficiently. That's a real, light bulb moment for people, and not just technical people, but people across the enterprise. I think the data people have had this experience for a while because they could always, they had the SQL skills. They had the ability to ask questions of data and get answers. So they know what that feeling is. But for people who have never had that ability, because they were always reliant on someone else to go ask the questions of the data, to be able to do that themselves is just, it's magic.
I think you hit the nail on the head there when you said it's not just technical people, because when it comes to making sense of numbers and making sense of data, for too long it's been incredibly intimidating to anyone outside of the tech industry. So I think you've kind of answered my question here, but I'm assuming that Looker's aimed at technical and non-technical users. Is it aimed at both of them? Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the goal with Looker is to better leverage the skills of the technical people to serve a lot more non-technical people, than they could otherwise. And the reality is that makes both sides very happy, because when the process for accessing data is business person comes to technical person, says, hey, I need the last 6 weeks of sales by state, and then they get that, and then they go, "Ooh, sorry, I actually need 8 weeks of sales by region." And the analyst rolls their eyes and goes, "All right, I'll go get that for you." Right. And they bring it back. Like, that is not a fun process for either side. The business person doesn't like having to wait, and the analyst doesn't like having to answer ad hoc questions that are small variations each time. And so for the analyst to be able to basically build a tool that the business user can use and serve themselves frees up the analyst to go do higher value work, and it lets the business person get answers more quickly.
It really isn't a fun situation. It's quite amusing to hear you tell it there, because although we're located thousands of miles apart, we've both had the exact same experience and see them rolling their eyes. So
it is sadly universal.
It really is. So you guys have enjoyed a fantastic year. What's next for Looker? Is there anything else you can share about what excites you about the future?
Well, I mean, I think mostly we're excited to sort of continue down this path. I mean, I think one of the things that we've really been focused on this year is building out what we think of as a data platform. So not just a BI tool, but a data platform where the platform can sort of support many different data experiences. It's not just about dashboards and reports. That is a useful thing and something that lots of people need. But the reality is a lot of people, a lot of the time, want a different data experience that's not a dashboard or report. They want, a purpose-built interface for their kinds of needs, or they want just the data to come to them on their phone or in Slack or, by email. And so I think Looker is uniquely positioned to provide that data platform that can underpin all of those different data experiences. And so building out that platform, building out all the pieces that people need in order to build those experiences is something we're really focused on and really excited about going forward.
Excellent. Well, a huge thank you for joining me today. If I do let you go, though, I know a lot of people listening are going to be wanting to find out more information. So can you just point them in the direction of where they can find Looker online, and also the best way of contacting your team if they're left with any questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So not surprisingly, we're at looker.com, spelled correctly, Looker. There's no silly misspelling there. And you can get in touch with us from there. We are always happy to answer questions.
Excellent. Well, a huge thank you for coming on today. This covered so much ground here, but what really stood out for me was how you've made this tool and made it available to both technical and non-technical people, because I think we all get carried away with the tech aspect sometimes. And you also said that it's the combination of tech and people, and that's the key point here. It's tech and people that change culture and change how we do things, and it's refreshing to hear that. So a big thank you for sharing that with me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Neil.
I love how the Looker platform for data delivers insights to user workflows, but allowing organizations to extract value from data. And the fact that they've also recently joined the Google family highlights just how much of a great job they're doing here. But if you go on their website, a few lines from their CEO really stood out for me too. And he said, data is no longer just a place to find answers. It's a place where ideas originate. And when everyone in your company is looking at the same numbers and sharing that same single version of the truth, they'll be able to collectively be smarter, make more informed decisions. And this is the core of the mission that they seem to have at Looker, to simply inspire everyone to embrace their curiosity, dig deeper, and keep asking questions. Incredibly wise words, and words that should inspire curiosity in everybody listening. But what are your thoughts? And do you have any insights that you can share around today's conversation? You can email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes, or pop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, and let me know what you thought. But we're out of time again, I'm afraid. But have no fear, I will return again, same time, same place tomorrow, and we'll do it all again. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.